Good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is Our View, the show that explores topics from our seat of poverty in Battle Creek. My name is Valerie. I'm the program coordinator for the Women's Co-op, and tonight we're joined by Robert Phillips. Robert is from Habitat for Humanity, and of course, Teresa Momini Young. She's the executive director of Women's Co-op. We thank you for coming with us tonight, Robert. We'd like to start by talking about some things that are going on in the Women's Co-op right now. And Teresa has some surprisingly good things to talk about.
Oh, we have a campaign right now called She Speaks Strength. We featured it in our last episode, but we're going to do it again. So each month we're featuring these lovely black and white t-shirts, one from a global woman hero. This one is Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high. And then we also feature a local woman hero. This month is Samantha Hughes, our board president. I'm wearing her shirt. Val, read this. Women need to focus on
empowering and raising one another up rather than competing with each other.
So say Miss Samantha Hughes.
So say Samantha.
The shirts are available on our website at www.womanscoop.org for $25 for purchase, and the money sure does go to a good cause. So, Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. Did you go by Robert or? Yeah, okay, so Robert. So last episode, we talked about being homeless in Battle Creek, and we all know that one of the things is a shortage of housing. And so when I think of housing stock in Battle Creek, I think of Habitat for Humanity. Actually, my son-in-law, Emerald Diamante, and my daughter, Jessie Diamante, purchased one of your homes there on McKinley and have been absolutely happy. It was a wonderful experience for my family and them. I've got 3 young grandchildren living in that home now. They were very low income, and affordability was an issue for them too. And you made the dream of living in a home possible. And so it just made perfect sense to have you on to talk about what does Habitat see for Battle Creek's housing stock, and what do you see? Do we need more of it?
Yeah, so like you said, we provide safe and affordable housing, and affordable housing, especially for low income, is just very difficult to find anywhere in the country. We do that very well. We just don't do it at the scale that needs to be done. Obviously, we do 2 to 3 homes a year, and yeah, what we're facing now is that the housing stock is just really at zero. We can't get our hands on to housing
to
rehab. We have 2 homes right now adjacent to each other in Washington Heights that we're working on, and then after that, we don't know for sure what's next. We'll probably do new builds, which Habitat Battle Creek hasn't done in a long, long time.
But you do have the potential to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what about apartment complexes? Like, has Habitat ever taken anything on like that, even nationally anywhere in other states?
We cannot be a renter, a landlord.
Oh, and that would require a renter.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And so I know when you and I talked on the phone, you said, well, Teresa, we don't really address homelessness. We address housing for low-income residents. But I do know that I don't have to have perfect credit and be at that 620 credit score to come to you and be considered for a Habitat home, because you will help me with those things, correct?
Yeah, so if someone walks in our door and they have to first qualify for need, you have to need to get out of your current living situation. Excuse me. And then second, you have to qualify for a mortgage, because at the end of the day, you will have a mortgage. And so somebody walks in the door and we give them a short explanation of our program and give them an application. If they come back with a completed application, they'll go to our state support office, become mortgage ready. And they could be mortgage ready, or they will work them through the steps to become mortgage ready. And at that point, they either come back to us, Habitat, or they go get conventional financing.
Do you get folks who have interest but can't be mortgage ready?
We have a lot of people come through the door. Not all of them come back to us because they just get lost in that financial piece. Either through hardships or for whatever reason, they just can't get that credit score to where it needs to be and become mortgage ready.
And is that the traditional 620 score still?
I'm not sure. We have people that would service our mortgages, so I don't know what
So
the
they could be a
score
little
is.
less, yeah, okay. But you're really looking for somebody who, the same thing that a traditional lender
Correct,
is looking
yes.
for, a safe bet on a home. How many homes does Habitat do annually, traditionally?
About 3.
About three.
So we have the 2 in Washington Heights. We also have one now in Albion that we deemed our first ever official veteran build. So that house is sitting there. It's mostly done, but we've been searching for a veteran for the last 18 months and we can't find one. So if you know of any veterans that need affordable housing, then I have a house in Albion for them.
Did you guys hear that out there in Battle Creek land? If you are a veteran and you are low income, Robert has a home for you in Albion available that he would like to put you in. So please call him. So I know that Habitat's not the answer for this because you don't go out and build units and you can't build units fast enough to house everybody. But as a resident of Battle Creek, do you see that that's the solution here is more housing stock?
Yeah, right before the pandemic, the Kellogg Foundation actually got a bunch of people into the room to talk about this, and it was a really exciting discussion.
That maybe Habitat could be involved in a project to do more?
Well, it's to provide a great deal of low-income housing in Battle Creek. So that Habitat would just be a little part of that, but there were players in the room that could provide, that en masse, and hopefully that discussion starts up again someday. But yeah, certainly.
Yeah, the pandemic has slowed us all down a little bit.
Certainly, there's a shortage of housing.
So I did reach out because I wondered, and I know that you're not involved in this, and so I don't expect you to be an expert on it, and I'm pretty much just asking you as a resident of Battle Creek and as a person who cares about housing stock for low-income residents. I thought about the apartments that we're putting downtown, and they're not affordable. And I thought, gosh, we have a lot of housing stock around town that isn't affordable.
Absolutely.
That's at a level that other folks can afford. But we have families that need the affordable housing. So if we were revamping and redeveloping downtown, it seemed to me that some more of that housing should be affordable. I've seen in the news where Kalamazoo did the Creamery, and it has 48 units, and they start at $319 a month. And I just wondered, and they have a 24-hour daycare on site. It was a beautiful dream for us. We were like,
Right.
Battle Creek could do something like that. But when I reached out to Shabaka Gibson, the vice president of retention from Battle Creek Unlimited, he told me that no, really, that housing wasn't designed to be low income. And although they do have a build going in at Schrank's, it would be affordable housing, but that's not really low-income housing. Because when we say affordable, it's the same thing we were talking about in our last episode. You have to be able to prove that you earn a little bit of money to be able to qualify, and even to be able to afford the rent, because he said he saw the rent being the traditional, $700 to $1,000 a month would maybe be the rent on a 1 or 2 bedroom, and we both know that that's not going to work for any
Right.
of our folks that are at that low income level. So what do you think about that? What's your opinion in that?
Yeah, so back to the Kellogg Foundation, a couple years ago, they did a big study on low-income housing, who could provide it, and what's the next step. We were in the report, and yes, Habitat can provide that, but not obviously at the scale that needs to be done here. So that's how that group, I think, came about, is after their study, they wanted to do more. And, I haven't heard about it since. So hopefully that group gets back together and find some
Starts talking
solutions.
again.
Yeah.
Right.
So Habitat could build an apartment complex. It just couldn't be the owner of that complex. So it could work in partnership with other entities in the community, and it could build the complex or help build the complex.
We've had discussions about a group of tiny houses that we would build. Somebody else would fund I've had those discussions.
Yeah, because that was the next thing I was going to ask you about, because I know when we talked the other day, you didn't seem to be a huge fan of it, but you seem to be open to the concept. And I know that Habitat in Kalamazoo has built 4 of them now. Is it 4, I think? They built, is it 4, Val?
I think it is. It's
Yeah, and then
Aspires.
Valerie has been doing some research across our state. I mean, I know they're doing stuff nationally too, but we tried to look for stuff that was just right here in Michigan. What is your take on the tiny home thing? I mean, we've torn homes down in post-addition, right? And so you have a lot where a home used to sit where you could actually put 2 tiny homes on that lot, right? And I know that we have some ordinances in the city that would prevent us from being able to do this right now, but we could rock that, we could change it. What's your opinion, being a home builder, building a tiny home for a family?
Yeah, like I said, the rehabable stock out there is 0, so we're going to have to come up with some creative solutions on what's next. And there's people doing all kinds of crazy stuff out there in Habitat land. I mean, building homes out of shipping containers and stuff. It's, you know, all kinds of options or all kinds of ideas are out there. And because of the shortage of housing stock, we're going to have to consider all options, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you think a tiny home could be built to accommodate a mom and 2 children, or 2 parents and 2 children, like a family of 4?
Honestly, I have no idea. I've never...
Are you a fan of tiny homes?
Yeah,
or?
if it can be done and people are interested. I guess what happens after that person wants to leave the tiny home? Is there going to be enough demand for people
to resell that tiny
Yeah.
home? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess. But then I also remember when I had the conversation with you, we talked about expense too, and I don't think a lot of people understand some of these tiny homes can be pretty expensive to build, especially when you're talking about the infrastructure and stuff for them too.
Yeah, the numbers that I've seen, they're just slightly less expensive than if we were to rehab a 1,200 square foot home.
And you
So-
could rehab that from top to bottom.
Yeah, the houses we have in Washington Heights, they look like they're from a horror movie.
Oh, my.
I mean, they're the ugliest things you've ever seen, but they will look brand new when we're done.
I know that my son-in-law and my daughter have a very beautiful home, all with very good quality materials. So I know Habitat does a really good job. I've actually been able to see a couple of your homes when they were finished because we volunteered a little bit on them, and so then we got to go to the celebration when the family got their house. But that's been, gosh, a couple of years.
Yeah,
We used to
it's been a few
participate in the
years.
women build.
I was just
Right.
going to ask if you've been part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we didn't for a couple of years, and then, well, there's been a pandemic, so nobody's really been participating in anything. So I think it's been probably 3 or 4 years now, but Triangle Mobile Home Park in Emmett Township was going through a lot of trouble, and we thought it was going to be seized for back taxes. We thought it was going to end up at the land bank, and so again, a group of people started meeting around a table and said, what does it look like if we develop something for families, low-income families, that kind of looks like what Silver Star did for vets? And we could put a program on site and programming, and we could create jobs within that space, and we could create a community center within that space that could have a daycare and have the things and the amenities that families need. Now, of course, that deal fell through because of the last minute. Triangle's taxes were paid, and it reverted back to the owner, and it's still an active trailer park. But what do you think about something like that, like making a community out of a trailer park? Like, you're sort of kind of the builder, right? Can't you get 2 tiny homes in each space of trailer? Like if you got a trailer there, you could replace that with 2 tiny homes?
Yeah, potentially. And yeah, as I was listening to your previous segment when I was sitting out in the lobby, that, homeless populations and homeless trouble and Habitat, how does those 2 things join? Mm-hmm. I've talked to Silver Star too about, they take homeless vets and get them into Silver Star, which is transitional somewhat, and then we talked to Silver Star about them getting out of Silver Star into a Habitat home. Mm-hmm. So that model could exist out there outside of the VA.
For
from the
low-income
Haven.
families.
Yeah.
Because that would give you some time. I mean, you could do this a couple different ways, right? Because tiny homes don't have to be a permanent structure either. They can be pull-away things. So you could work with a family to eventually buy a plot of land and move this tiny home to the plot of land and get a loan for infrastructure, and then you can build up from there. I mean, maybe tiny home is what you did for now, but I'd really like to have a full-size home. But then you've got to consider the things like you said, like, is there a market to resell that home then? Or do you just create this tiny home community and then they go from there into full-size homes or home ownership? I'm not letting Val talk much today, but she's nodding.
So I was just going to say that, we talked about the price of the homes, and in the research that I've done, to start up for the cost of a tiny home, it's about $45,000. And then the folks in Cass County, when they did theirs, their initial intake was from the Ford Motor Company, and then all of their homes are powered by solar panels. So that keeps their utility costs down once they've moved in, and then those folks can live there for 7 years with no issues, and then they're given the deed to that home, and then their rent is based upon their income. I think that is a good project or a good pilot for something that we could look at here in Battle Creek, but we would have to have buy-in from other community players as well, just to be able to do that.
I also wonder how expensive the infrastructure would be for something like that. Like if you're talking about, if we use Triangle Space, they had 240 pads for trailers. So even if you replace those with 240 tiny homes, what's the infrastructure look like for something like that? Are we talking hundreds and thousands of dollars to just build the infrastructure?
Power and water and everything?
Or do you just use the existing? Can you?
Yeah, I would imagine you could.
Yeah, it's
How deep has Habitat's conversations gone locally on tiny homes? Like I know your board's talked about it some.
Yeah, not since I've been here have we talked about tiny homes, but it is an interesting concept. If you could get the houses funded initially without a mortgage at the end of 7 years, like you said, then the owner, the occupant is the owner of the tiny home. So yeah, that's an interesting concept. It's then if they wanted to move, I'm not stuck with a tiny home with a mortgage on it that I have to resell.
Right, absolutely, because then it just stays there for the next low-income person to use. And we've gotten some pushback from some peeps in our world who said a tiny home, that small space, you want a family to live in that tiny small space. You just want to give homeless people this tiny small space, Teresa. And I'm thinking when people go to shelter, their family is living in one room.
right.
I guess they come out to share the kitchen and the living room and the facility with the rest of the shelter, but basically that family's living in one room. And some of these tiny homes can really accommodate some nice space. Like I've seen them where they've had lofts for the children and then maybe a fold-out bed for the adults on the bottom and folds up during the day. I mean, I think it's a nice alternative. Do you think there are other things that we could be considering for our community for housing stock for low income? I mean, I know rehab is a good thing, but you said, hey, that can't really happen at a 12, 25, 50 homes a year. Maybe tiny home could be something. What other alternatives? Like I asked our last guest, if I had a blank check to give you and could say, Robert, you can pick any solution you'd like to solve this crisis in Battle Creek of homelessness. Tell me what you'd like to do.
Yeah, I would like to explore those other options. Simply because that's what we're forced to do now, and I'm glad you're thinking about it because I haven't started thinking about it yet. I'm kind of focused on starting the new builds, but we always have 2 or 3 projects going on at any one time, and I like this off-the-wall thinking and what can we really do quickly and efficiently so that people have more access to safe and affordable housing.
Absolutely.
So what do you think the reason is behind the fact that Habitat, is there just not enough housing that's out there, or is it that the blight in the homes are just to an extreme to where you guys wouldn't be able to rehab them? What is the cause behind that?
So typically we get our homes from the Calhoun County Land Bank. They sell them to us at a very reasonable price. And so then we have some room in there to rehab them and still not lose money. But that housing stock is very low. We have a fairly specific model of house that we do. It's 1 story, 800 to 1,200 square feet. So we're limited by that. But even if I go out there and look on the open market, there's nothing for sale.
Right.
So that's why we have to transition into doing new builds or tiny homes, or a lot of Habitat affiliates out there do repairs, roofs. We do wheelchair ramps now. Yeah, that's, unless something changes, then Habitat's going to have to change what our typical model is.
Right.
And are you aware too, like I remember having a conversation with your predecessor prior to you becoming the executive director, and we talked about a lot of the stock of home that was down in Post Edition in Washington Heights. And I was told that so many of those homes are past their threshold. Like literally the foundations are falling apart to them. Like we don't know what we don't know. And so a donor a few years ago donated a property on Inroad to us, which now is with the land bank. But we got into the home and thought that if we just gave this home to one of our family members, they could fix it up and bring it up to code. That was the most ridiculous idea we've ever come up with, and we will never have that idea again. But it was very challenging to look at some of the things that were, like a home that was sitting there that looked like it was okay to us, and then you got into the structural issues. And I've heard that a lot of the homes down in Post and Washington Heights are just kind of past that threshold of being able to be rehabbed. Do you agree with that?
So the house we're working on now, we had to rebuild one of the foundation walls, and then everything gets stripped down to nothing. All that's left is studs, and that's where we start. So we take them pretty bad. I mean, there's basically a 3-walled house with no roof, or, you know, and we'll turn it into a structurally sound house that you wouldn't be able to tell if it was brand new or not.
Wow.
So we can take some
because
pretty...
the house that you built for Emerald and Jesse, that one was in pretty sorry shape too, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was before my time, but our
Because I think they stripped that down to bare stud to do it. Like
that's
there was
usually what
nothing.
happens, yeah.
Yeah.
So our house that we have, that we will start on next, our construction manager's been around for 12 years, I think. He says it's the worst house he's ever seen.
Oh, wow.
So that's,
What about
when I say
those-
the housing stock's low, that's, you know, that's
what's
where we're-
available.
Yeah, that's what's available.
Wow.
What about these contractors and developers that you work with? Did any of them talk about tiny homes or the potential for tiny homes? Any of them interested in it?
No, it's really not been a discussion, other than I had a discussion with the VA about it, because someone had the idea to start a tiny home community for women veterans, I think, with PTSD.
Oh, nice.
Other than that, I think that's the only discussion I've ever had about tiny homes.
How do you think the city of Battle Creek feels about tiny homes? I know they have an ordinance that would prevent tiny homes right now.
Oh, do they? I don't know.
There's something about stick build and it has to be so many square feet, and most tiny homes are below that or something. One of our ordinances or something in the city. You don't know?
No.
Yeah. Because tiny homes is not what you do, right?
So
But it
there's
could
plenty
be.
of habitats out there that do, so we could.
You could
We
potentially
could,
do
yeah.
it.
I mean, the blueprints are already out there probably. All they'd have to do is call around the habitats and say, hey, what are you doing with tiny houses?
Absolutely. Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. We
Thank you.
appreciate you very much. We'll keep looking for Habitat Build homes and things in the future. I hope that table comes back together and starts talking. If you guys start talking about tiny homes, though, you have to make sure that me and my friend Val down there are included at the table somewhere.
Will do.
Because this has been an exciting thing for us for, I don't know, probably about a half a decade now,
Yeah.
that we've mingled in and out of different groups in the community who've actually talked about the potential for creating a tiny home community, and then something always happens and it fizzles out. In fact, lastly, we were discussing with our church. We're housed at Trinity Lutheran Church, and they were discussing maybe purchasing some property, building some tiny homes, and being the keeper of these homes. They've since kind of shifted to thinking that maybe it's better to do boarding houses and rehab a house and do boarding houses. But you know, our situation with that is that's no different than a homeless shelter, and you're talking about a women and children. I mean, we care about men and we care about the whole family, but we serve women and children, and we have a lot of women and children who need housing. And so putting them in a boarding house situation, I think it's not conducive of trying to
Right.
create a space with family values and those things. But
Yes, when I mentioned earlier that I had discussions with group regarding tiny houses or something similar to that, it was Trinity.
oh, was it?
Yeah, so I was in on that discussion to begin with, and we were behind the concept, and we still could be. You know, and that maybe kicks off this whole tiny house thing. But so I was interested in that because we weren't the mortgage holder.
Right.
So
Right. Oh, I get that. So that would make it easier. So if other people were at the table, Habitat would definitely be interested in the project. Well, maybe we'll all be sitting at a different table discussing all this in the future. Because I don't really have a blank check, but I know that there's some people in the community who have the ability to be able to pull people together to fund something like this.
Absolutely.
So if you care about that, I hope you're listening. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Battle Creek, for yet another discussion on how poverty shapes things in Battle Creek, Michigan, and where we need to do better. And one of the things that we need to do better on is creating situations for folks to be able to realize the dream of not only home ownership, but even just being able to have affordable quality housing. Thanks for joining us.